So a few months before Will and I got married, we had decided to write down some of the things that we want to accomplish in our lifetime. And one of the things was a list of places that we would like to travel. Bali was on the list, and because of the time of year that we got married, we decided that we would go to Bali on our honeymoon. But you can't fly direct to Bali. So I had decided that instead of doing layovers, we would do stopovers. So we had the opportunity to stop for a day and a half in Singapore on the way to Indonesia, and on the way home, we were able to stop for a day in Hong Kong.
Honeymoon, Singapore, yay, extra legroom seat.
Actually, when we first got on board, we had brought with us leftover cookies that we had from our wedding and made sure that the flight crew got them and knew that we were on our honeymoon.
The flight attendants gave us champagne, dessert, and teddy bears in return.
The thing I remember the most from that flight was the screaming children and not being able to sleep at all on the flight.
For a list of all our stays, please check out the video description below. Our place in Singapore was on the smaller side, but it was nice. And we made it messy in no time at all.
I love going on food tours when I travel because I love eating authentic cuisine to the place that we're in, going to places that you wouldn't as a tourist naturally go on your own, and so we did a food tour in Singapore.
Hawker centers are basically food courts that reflect the large diversity of cultures found in Singapore. I really wish YouTube had some form of smell-o-vision, because this food smelled divine. And here's our little tribute to Phil Rosenthal, the host from Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix, one of our favorites. Check it out. And no, we didn't eat any frogs. I had to resist the urge to set them free. If it looks like we're eating a ton of food, we absolutely did. In our experience, you get stuffed on food tours. In fact, we eat so much that we often run out of room before the tour ends. Here we have iced beans, a Malaysian treat that one could easily mistake for Hawaii's shaved ice. These are classic dishes and just so good.
So it's a carrot cake.
Carrot cake.
The carrot cake, that's not in the market. I told you the...
After the food tour was over, officially over, he was like, hey, you know, would you like to come get a bird's eye view of the city from my apartment building? Yeah, we said, sure. You know, we didn't have any safety concerns or anything like that, since Singapore is one of the safest places anywhere, basically.
Chewing gum is banned there. Still, to this day, if you're arrested for graffiti, you'll get caned. And the punishment for drug smuggling is death.
One of the places that we visited after the food tour was the Marina Bay Sands. And it's a hotel, and the architecture is absolutely amazing. So we went all the way up to the top and had a drink and got a really great view of the rest of the architecture around Singapore as well. Probably one of the biggest touristy areas that we went to was a place called Gardens by the Bay.
They have a handful of attractions with free admission, and several more that you have to purchase tickets for. We paid to visit the Cloud Forest, an indoor conservatory that's popular on social media. At night in the Super Tree Grove, they have a very Disney-esque light and music show. The next morning, we had some time to kill before our next flight.
We explored the Singapore airport. It's listed as the best airport in the world. They have free chair massages. They have a butterfly garden. They have a gigantic indoor waterfall. And so if you have a layover in Singapore, don't worry. There's a lot of really cool things to see in the airport. So as we were descending into Bali, off in the distance, I saw this big black thing.
From way up high, it looked like billowing black smoke, because we were like, that whatever that thing is, it can't be a building because it's oddly shaped. It's not a cube or anything.
As we were leaving Bali, we discovered that the thing in the distance that we saw that we thought was smoke was the largest statue in the world.
Prior to going to Bali, we of course looked at vacation videos online on YouTube, and we'd see a lot of these videos where they recommended taking or renting scooters to get around. So we looked into that briefly, and you had to get like an international license in order to do that, or either, you know, you just pay off the guy or whatever to rent you the scooter without the license. But, you know, quickly it became apparent to us, just normal city traffic driving through Bali, that it's very dense, very packed, and we're of like mind of, you know, this is not a risk that we want to take, especially at this age in life. Never having been there before or navigated that kind of traffic, we had decided early on that we were just going to take taxi cabs everywhere, or rent out a shuttle, which you can do, a private taxi cab or whatever. So we were safe and happy doing that.
Upon arriving at the airport in Bali, we found it a little confusing on where to catch our ride. So here's a little map of where you should go. We don't know if it's still current or not, but we hope it helps.
So Ubud was probably one of my favorite places in Indonesia, because you're in the middle of this lush forest, and there's wildlife everywhere. So probably most predominantly were the monkeys. One morning, Will and I were having breakfast, and I remember seeing one of the workers of the restaurant put one of these offerings out, and a monkey just crossed the street, hopped up, grabbed the cracker, and threw the rest of the offering over his shoulder. And she came out with a broom shooing him away. He ran away. She put out a new offering. The monkey came back, took that cracker. It was very funny.
Our Airbnb ended up being like right across the street almost from the monkey forest.
So we had monkeys playing right in our front yard. It was surreal to see at first.
We opened the door, and it was a really, really large room.
Despite being on the third floor of a villa, it almost felt like we had our own private bungalow. The staff was super friendly and made us this treat.
And there was a door off to the side, and I remember thinking, oh, this must be the bathroom. So I opened the door, and to my surprise, it was the bathroom. However, it was also outside, and there was a sign, and it said, please don't leave any of your belongings outside because the monkeys will come take it.
I think we saw that night our first feral dog. There are a lot of feral dogs and cats all over Indonesia. But we saw this one little cute, kind of mangy little dog sitting outside a storefront which was closed, and we were wondering you know, does this dog actually belong to the owner and it's sitting there to guard it, or is it just taking a break there? Anyway, that was the first encounter we had with feral dogs and cats. And every time we saw them, we took their photo and gave them a name and wanted to take them home with us.
So our first full day in Bali, I had scheduled a bike tour. So it was a regular size bicycle that had a motor that you could use if you wanted to or you didn't have to. And we went around rice paddies, and that's where I think we saw our first Indonesian cat.
Look what I found in Bali, Indonesia. He's my new friend, and he's coming home with me. Bonnie, say hi to your new brother.
Riding around rice paddies is serene for sure, but it's hard to grasp the size of them without an aerial view like this. You'll find cute spots like this all over Bali that seem engineered for social media.
The next stop on the tour is the coffee plantation, where they have the famous cat poop coffee. The Kopi Luwak, I believe, is the name of this jungle cat there that's native to the island.
The luwak will eat the coffee bean. It goes through their digestive tract and they poop it out, and the people making the coffee go and they pick up the luwak poop and they clean all of the coffee beans and roast them and make this horribly bitter coffee out of it.
And then later that night, we were walking around Ubud again in the downtown area, and we passed by this shop, and sitting on the ledge outside this shop was this black furry mass, and dangling down the side was this big furry tail. And as we were coming up, I was like, what the hell is that? Like, is that just like a really big cat? And Tony Joy was like, I don't know, is it even alive? Because it's just sitting there. And then we get closer and we're like, oh, you know, it actually looks like a luwak. So we were told they are naturally aggressive and everything, and as far as we knew, nobody had them as pets. So our first thought was this thing is stuffed, right? Like it's a stuffed cat that a tourist can come by and take their photo with. But Tony Joy saw fit to investigate, so she walks up and she she gives the tail a nice little tug, and the head whips around, and yeah, it was a live luau. Fortunately, it was tame. It just kind of looked at us, and we let it be after that.
So I think probably my favorite part of Ubud was the monkey forest. The monkey forest was directly across the street from the Airbnb that we booked, but there was a wall around it, but it was very low and the monkeys could come and go as they pleased. A lot of monkeys do stay in that area because they do feed the monkeys.
And it's like being in Jumanji, right? With all the little monkeys scurrying around, getting into mischief. And you just can't, being an American tourist, you just can't imagine anything like this happening here for, you know, liability issues. But there it's just like magical.
So there are signs at the beginning of the monkey forest requesting that you do not touch the monkeys. And it also instructed you that if a monkey were to jump on you, don't do anything, don't panic, he will jump off. And there was also very, very strict instructions. Do not bring food into the forest, because if you do, they will jump on you and they will find the food and they will take it from you.
In addition to hosting the monkeys, the park grounds are just absolutely beautiful. There are 3 Hindu temples located inside, all dated to around 1350.
So we were walking around the monkey forest, and we actually saw the handlers putting monkeys on people's shoulders for photos and whatnot, even though that seemed like that kind of practice was not supposed to be happening. So, you know, I asked Tony Joy at one point, you know, do you want me to give one of those guys money to have our photo or her photo with a monkey? And she said no.
So we saw this lone monkey sunning itself, and we thought that was our opportunity to safely steal a photo.
We came across a bunch of baby monkeys swinging on vines and letting go and jumping into the pool below. It was so cute.
After that, we went to the Sarin House, which is this restaurant kind of on a hilltop. It's got this magnificent view.
The food was delicious, but the sunset was just absolutely amazing. So other than monkeys and feral cats and feral dogs, there were also a lot of geckos. So we would go out to restaurants at night, and if you would look up at the restaurant ceiling, you would just have geckos all over the ceiling. So one night I woke up and I had to use the bathroom, which is outside, and I got out of bed and Will said, "Be careful, there's a really big one out there." And so I opened the door really slowly and I saw this giant gecko. We affectionately named him King Louie. So we did go on a waterfall tour, and we went to 3 different waterfalls in the area.
The first thing we noticed was that none of the waterfalls we visited were wheelchair friendly. Each one required a short hike, usually involving stairs. And if you're hoping for that perfect, Insta-worthy snapshot, you need to arrive early to avoid the crowds. Getting to the Tukad Chapun waterfall feels like an adventure and requires getting wet, so we recommend bringing water shoes. Here you can see we had to wait about 10 minutes for a photo op. This was for my loving mother, who has a tendency to worry about us. Downstream from the waterfall is a small temple with a spring pool. And it's not a hot spring. It's a freezing my nips off spring.
So our last day in Ubud, we did a temple tour, and I had arranged it so they would pick us up in Ubud and then drop us off in our next destination, which was the Blue Lagoon.
Built in 1946, Tirtha Ganga is a former royal palace. Its waters are considered sacred. If you love koi like I do, prepare for some koi porn. As we were leaving, we saw a photo booth with adorable animals and had to stop. Now, Tony Joy likes owls, but she's batty for bats.
He was huge and very, very heavy. He was probably about 20 pounds. And it was really cute because he crawled up and then started licking my face.
Already in the gate. What's there? If you need a prayer, if you Balinese people.
The next stop was even more crowded.
At this place, it wasn't just like you just got in a line and waited. They actually had this system where you could get a ticket number and then you'd wait to get your number called. So you could go up to that one spot, you know, the perfect spot for your Instagram photo or whatever. And when we got there, the wait was already like 3 hours long. So we're like, no way, you know, we're not gonna do that. Off to the side, there was kind of a ledge with a platform, and some enterprising people have set up these different, like a swing and something else, a bed or something like that, where you can get your photo taken for an extra fee with the volcano in the background, and you don't have to wait 3 hours. So we did that, and we have those pictures.
So we were only in Blue Lagoon for the night, and we had traveled to Blue Lagoon because we were taking a ferry to Gili Meno the next morning. And so while we were in the Blue Lagoon, we did go on a snorkeling tour, and there was a lot of beautiful fish, but most memorable for me was that I saw a sea turtle. And I remember I pointed it out to Will, and I was like, look, it's a sea turtle. And he was like, oh yeah, I've seen those in Hawaii.
After the snorkeling tour, we went back to check into the resort. The beach area is small, with a limited number of dining options. We ended up eating dinner at a local bar grill. The resort was charming, and it seemed like a popular place to learn how to scuba dive in their pool. The room had everything we needed, including a big bathroom.
So the next morning we woke up and we had to find this ferry that we were going to board to go to Gili Meno, and we could not find it.
And we're just looking on Google Maps, you know, where to find the ferry. And we saw, you know, there was this port area, so we just started heading that way. And we saw, as we were walking towards that area, we saw, incoming tourists with their luggage coming our way. So we thought, you know, at least we're at that time that we are on the right track. So we finally get over there, and there are boats and everything, but it's just clear that this is not the right place. There's no, you know, there's nothing welcoming about it.
There was a gentleman on a moped, and he looked at the paper I'd printed out. He's like, no, 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 that's not what you need. Hop on, I'll take you. And I was like, okay. So I hopped on the moped with this gentleman, and Will stayed with the luggage, and he brought me up this windy street to this office that we never would have found. And I checked us in, and I got our tickets to board, and then he brought me back.
Once reunited, we looked at the map again and realized that the ferry was leaving from a pier that was just a stone's throw away from our resort.
At least I thought this was a good lesson for us for the future, and if you're going there, that even if you kind of have an inkling of where you need to be, you should just, before you leave, you should check with the hotel front desk. If they have a concierge or just a clerk, and double check with them, you know, where should I be, or where do I have to go exactly in order to catch this boat or plane or whatever.
We got on the ferry, and I remember that we wanted to sit up on the roof, and so we were there. And had we been a little wiser, we probably would have noticed that the people working on the ferry were completely covered. They had long sleeve shirts, and they had scarves up over their faces. They were completely covered. And that is because the sun was extraordinarily intense. And I didn't realize it at the time, because when the ferry is moving, there's a nice breeze. But the tops of my legs were extremely sunburnt by the time we got to the island.
East of Bali, there's a chain of 3 small islands. The smallest, Gili Meno, sits in the middle and is known as a romantic retreat for honeymooners.
So the ferry drops us off at this little island, and when it drops you off, there are people waiting there to pick you up, like taxis, but they're not cars. They're guys with ponies. I guess they're ponies. They're little ponies, right? Or ponies are little, and with a cart, and you can, you know, you pay them, you get in the cart, and they take you to where you need to go to on the island. Because I guess what we would find out later is that, you know, in the middle of the island, there's these paved roads or pathways or streets, you know, that island's so small, and that's the best way to get around. But we had decided to not take the taxi. Instead of taking the pony ride, we just opted to walk. So we just figured, well, all we have to do is walk around the island for like 10-15 minutes, and we're gonna hit our hotel. So we start walking with our luggage, and wouldn't you know it, soon enough, that trail around the island, the paved ways start giving way to dirt and gravel, and then eventually sand. So there we are, we're dragging our big luggage through the sand around this path to get to the hotel. And of course, it's not 10-15 minutes. I don't remember now. It was at least twice as long, maybe 3 times as long. And at one point, Tony Joy was walking in front of me, and she had her suitcase. She had her suitcase right lifted up on her back like this, kind of like walking like, because at that time it was the best way in her mind. So at some point I just told her, all right, look, stop. Stop, leave your bags, you go ahead, you go forward, you see, you know, just how much further we have to go. And once you get there, you tell the porters, or, you know, you ask the clerks very nicely if they can come back and help me. So I got all the bags now, and I'm kind of lugging them through the sand. And the funny thing is that we're passing all these other hotels and whatnot on our way there, right? And sometimes people would be out there, or on our other side was the beach, and people would see us kind of just walking by, and no one ever once was like, hey, you know, there's a smarter way to do this. Or no one even, you know, offered to help or anything like that, or ask us, hey, you know, which hotel are you going to, or whatever. It was just, we were completely on our own. So at that point, I've got all of our bags, and I'm lugging them through the sand, stop, rest, and lugging them through the sand, stop, rest. And then finally, these two guys from the hotel come up, very nice, and, you know, they help me. They basically grab everything, or almost everything, and we go to the hotel, and we had our own bungalow, like our own bungalow with our own little fenced-in area, and we had our own little mini pool. And at that point, I was worried about, you know, heat stroke or something. So we got there, and actually, I gave the guys all the cash I had or whatever, because I was so grateful for their help. And then I just went right into the pool to cool off. So that was our only brush with death, as far as I can remember.
Here's a long look at our bungalow. Please excuse the mess. Again. From now on, we'll have to shoot our stays before we spend the night in them. Bow chicka wow wow.
So we had debated whether we were going to pay for another snorkeling tour, but then we realized that you could see where the tours were bringing people around the island, and you could get to them yourself. And so we just rented snorkel gear, and we went to one of the places we wanted to see.
I want to say we walked over coral to finally be able to get to the water where it was deep enough for us to swim. It was a little sketchy at first, but once we were in the water, it was okay.
The snorkeling gear was definitely cheap, but hey, so are we sometimes.
There's also a little turtle sanctuary on Gili Meno, and when you look it up, it seems like maybe it's this big place, but you get there and it's just this small little shack, and it's this one guy who's helping to raise these sea turtles. There is coral everywhere, and so there were areas where you really had to make sure that you had your water shoes on, because it was very sharp.
And I remember we were having dinner, and we struck up a conversation with our server, and of course, all the people that we met in Bali were very nice. All the service workers, they're extremely nice. And so we were talking to this guy, and he was telling us how he's not actually from Gili Meno, right? Because it's so small. He's from a neighboring island. But what they do is they come over from that island, and they'll stay on Gili Meno and just kind of like a bunk room for a few days or a week or whatever, and work, and then go home, and then come back for another shift at another time. But in retrospect, I guess he is kind of fortunate, because we talked to other people, like a cab driver who had said that generally speaking, you know, they're so poor that if they're born and raised on a certain island, you know, they can't afford to ever leave that island ever in their lives. And when you see that, you know, people, you know, the state that most of the islanders are living in with, you know, they're just kind of like huts or shacks. Very humbling and very, very sad for us to witness and see.
When it was time to leave Gili Meno, we did the smart thing for once and hired a chidomo. But we still had time to kill before our boat ride. So now's probably a good time to mention that, in our experience, the boats and ferries generally run behind schedule. For our short trip from Gili Meno to Lombok, we were picked up by a speedboat instead of a ferry. As you can see, it's a faster, albeit bumpier ride on the water.
So Lombok is known as the less busy Bali. And Lombok is absolutely beautiful. We stayed in an Airbnb again.
We had an entire villa to ourselves for a really low price. A family of 4 or more could have stayed there. And out of all of our stays, it had the nicest pool by far. We could have spent all day there, but we wanted to explore.
So when we got to Lombok, we went down to the area where a lot of the restaurants are that are on the beach, and you could just walk along the beach and it's restaurant after restaurant. So we decided to stop and eat, and we were able to watch the sunset again from there. The next morning, we went to the zoo in Lombok, and we had paid for the top experience that they had, and I think it was $30 a person. When you first walk into the zoo, after getting the basket of fruit, you see the tropical birds. And they would ask you to put your arm out, and the bird would fly over and land on your arm.
Yep.
He's heavy.
All the animals, well, not all of them, most of the animals were just out. They weren't in cages like we're accustomed to seeing here. And the guide would say, okay, do you see that fruit? This guy likes that fruit. And so he would help us give the correct fruit to the right animal.
Mini bear.
Hey, buddy.
They don't jump, right?
No, don't. Hold the hands. The heads. Yeah.
The fanciest part of that zoo experience was when we actually got to get into the water and give an elephant a bath.
Looking back, the water definitely was not sanitary.
Oh,
I mean, you're right next to this giant creature, and it just makes you realize if for whatever reason the elephant wanted to grab you with its trunk and put you under the water, until you stop kicking. It could do that. It could totally do that, right? Even though the guides are there, it could do that. And so it just gives you kind of like a certain respect for the animal.
We were also able to get photos with an orangutan.
And this guy was also, you know, you just had to kind of respect its strength and power. At one point, I was wearing a bandana, and he reached down and he just plucked it off my head, and the handlers just kind of laughed, and it was like, oh, it's kind of comical and stuff. But you could tell, you know, and this is why this doesn't happen in the States, if the orangutan wanted to, he could just snap my neck.
Good here.
Lean in, lean in, lean in.
Yep. Yeah.
We finished the zoo with a joyous surprise. They had 2 adorable orangutan juveniles.
Have more confidence to climb up the tree. So every day, 2 hours, we have this session. Hi, Kiki.
Just a little high five action.
Back at the villa, we discovered 2 cats that had to be siblings. We made several attempts to befriend them with whatever food we had on us. Before buying some cat food at a convenience store.
Hi. Hi, sugar cookie. Hi.
Sisters.
So we left Lombok to go back to Bali, and again, it wasn't a ferry, it was a speedboat.
We checked in at the local pier and had to wait a long time. No surprise there. But we were surprised that we had to board from the beach, and that was the start of a hellish experience. Now on this map you can see our starting point at Senggigi, followed by a scheduled stop at Nusa Lembongan, before reaching our ultimate destination at Sanur, a journey of about 3 hours in total. We thought it was gonna be smooth sailing, but the boat was pretty empty on the first leg of the trip.
This speedboat captain, it was like he was going full throttle the whole time. And there, you know, like I said, there weren't a lot of us on the boat. So we'd hit a wave, fly up, and then bang, hit the next wave. And at first it was like, oh, you know, this is adventurous. You're like on a roller coaster or whatever. But this went on for almost an hour.
And people were genuinely scared. There were a lot of people putting their life vests on. One woman yelled, "I don't want to die on a boat." We had other people who were getting seasick. And I did have to lean forward and close my eyes because I was starting to get seasick.
After we made our stop, they pretty much filled up the boat, and from that point on, it was better. We get back to Bali, and the speedboat, you know, there was no dock, so it just kind of pulls up and it drops us off in like waist deep water to us. And actually, there are some very short women on that, some short tourists who are, you know, like 5 feet tall or whatever. So those women like had to climb on the backs of the boat handlers or whatever in order to go through the water, or else, you know, it'd be up to here on them.
The sun was going down and there was a breeze. By the time we caught a taxi, we were both freezing.
And there's actually, you can fly from Lombok to Bali and back. So my recommendation is to fly if you're if you're doing that particular route, and if we ever did that again, we would fly.
That night, we grabbed dinner and went straight to bed. For our last day in Bali, we decided to keep things chill in Kuta, which is the island's primary resort town. Apparently, it's a great place for nightlife and learning how to surf. Our Airbnb was tucked away on a side street like a hidden fortress. There was an outdoor kitchen and even a scooter at our disposal. Inside, it was a studio with a loft and actually felt pretty spacious. Tony, Joe, and I would recommend all of our stays on this trip. During the daytime in Kuta, you can basically dine and or shop. Here at Seminyak Village was a nice mall that rivals what you'd see in the US.
Leaving Bali, we had to stop at the Singapore airport once again. And this time it was just a layover on our way to Hong Kong.
We flew into Hong Kong and it was really late. We landed close to midnight. But I remember looking out the window and just seeing Hong Kong. And I mean, I've been to big cities before, but you have not seen a big city until you have seen Hong Kong. But I got up the next morning and they had a continental breakfast at the hotel. And so we took the elevator up to the floor where they had the breakfast, and the doors open, and I just remember the smell of bacon, and I was so happy that it was like bacon and not like the other bacon, the beef bacon. So one of the concerns we had going to Hong Kong was that it was during the times of the protest. And I had scheduled a food tour in Hong Kong, and so I was actually able to send a text message to this local that I had scheduled the tour with, and I asked him if he thought it would be safe for us. He let us know that because we were there on a Wednesday, no protests were scheduled, and that it should be completely safe for us to leave the airport and do the food tour.
And our first stop was Victoria Peak, which is, I think we took the subway and then we took a taxi ride, and then you have to pay to take like a train ride up the hillside to the peak, where you get this, you know, you've probably seen it in movies or on YouTube or wherever, this panoramic view of Hong Kong. And it's just jaw-dropping. It's like 360 wherever you look. It's these huge skyscrapers, and it's like, this is the city of the future, you know, like you see in science fiction movies. Oh.
So definitely my favorite part of Hong Kong was the food tour. I just loved the food. We did a street food tour, so it wasn't fancy restaurants. We were just going to the street vendors. And again, it's food that as a tourist, I wouldn't feel confident or comfortable going up to these street vendors and ordering the food, not knowing what it is. But having the local there, he's able to explain to us what the food is.
That whole afternoon and into the early evening, he took us all around. And he had actually had been living in the Seattle area for quite a while before moving back to Hong Kong. And so being a tour guide in Hong Kong had become his full-time job because he just made so much money off of it.
Of course, this was pre-pandemic, and his situation must have changed now. We wish him nothing but the best, and hope he can continue doing food tours when it's safe to do so again. Looking up at these apartments here, Edward explained that every AC unit that you see constitutes one dwelling. The apartments have been partitioned, sometimes multiple times, because housing is scarce and extremely expensive.
So my favorite item on the food tour was the red bean sesame ball, and it was a street food vendor, and they had a Michelin star, and I didn't know that street food vendors could get Michelin stars, but they had a Michelin star, and I actually took one of them on the road with us as well.
Why'd you take that little baby bite?
Because I don't trust it.
We also had deep fried milk, and after asking a little bit about what this was, it's actually condensed milk, and they put it in a form and they freeze it, and then they put batter on it and they just deep fry it really quickly.
Edward warned us that these soup dumplings would be piping hot, so of course I made Tony Joy try it first.
Poke a hole in there to suck the soup out. Yeah, you gotta suck the soup out first.
Wait,
Suck the soup
let
out?
him do it
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, you want.
It's gotta be hot.
Even before our final stop, we were both exhausted from being on our feet all day, and our stomachs were pretty much full already. But Edward convinced us to try one more thing.
He did try to get us to eat pig fallopian tubes. I passed. Okay, maybe next time.
After the food tour, we went straight to the airport to board the long flight back home. Being exhausted in this regard was actually quite helpful. world's a big place, and there are many spots on our bucket list still to visit. So perhaps the greatest compliment I can pay to Singapore, Indonesia, and Hong Kong is that we'd gladly revisit all three again. We really couldn't have asked for a better honeymoon.
I remember getting home and the trip was a total of 17 days. So I was definitely really happy to be home. Very, very exhausted because of the amount of traveling we had done in such a short period of time. But it was definitely the trip of a lifetime.
Hey, thanks for watching this video, everyone. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and come back again for more content in the future.